another episode of Empty Two Ministries. I'm Christina Morgan, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to start an English as a second language ministry. One of the reasons that people don't start ESL ministries is because they just don't know where to begin. So we're going to talk today about some simple things you can do to start an ESL ministry, or just some things to think about in order to prepare to start ESL. So first, there's training available. The North American Mission Board, for example, has workshop leaders who teach teachers or train people to become ESL teachers. You don't have to have any experience. There are other organizations that teach people to teach ESL. There are online certificates you can get to teach ESL. So there are lots of training options. You don't have to have one day of teaching experience in order to teach internationals to teach English. Second, you don't need to speak a foreign language. If I was to speak the language of all the students that I taught, I'd have to speak like 80 different languages. So you don't have to speak the language of your students in order to teach them English. We teach by something called immersion, which means we only speak English to our students. We want them to learn to speak English, and so we speak English to them. And I know it sounds impossible, but trust me, when you take the training, they will teach you how to teach your students English without you knowing their language. So it is possible. You may have learned that way in college, and you just may not have thought about, oh, someone can learn English the way I learned Spanish. You just didn't have a reason to keep using your Spanish necessarily, so you didn't practice it as often. Or maybe you did, and if you did, then you can think about it now. Oh, yeah, wait, that's right. I did learn a lot of good, useful language skills that way. So one, we need to train. Number two, we don't need to speak a foreign language. Number three, so where are my classes going to be? If you're starting this as a church ministry, well, you're going to have the classes at your church. If you're starting it as a community ministry, try maybe your local YMCA, your library, a community center. These are great places to have English as a second language. A lot of times they're more than happy to host something like that because they're there to serve the community and they know this is a need of the community. So there's definitely a good specific place in your area to have your ESL classes. So when are your classes? When do you want them to meet? Some people think, okay, if I'm going to have it at my church, why don't I just have it Wednesday night? Because I need childcare, and you do need childcare, especially if you're going to have it during the daytime, because preschool moms can't come if they can't bring their preschoolers. They just don't have anybody to watch them. And in the evening, if they have school-age children and the husband and wife want to come, well, they can't come unless they have someone to watch their children. So childcare is very important. So they think, oh, well, I'll just have it Wednesday night because then childcare is built in. But typically Wednesday night services are about 1 hour, and that's really not long enough to get a good ESL class going. You want to have it for about 1.5 to 2 hours. So you want to have it on a night that's different than Wednesday night for your main core ESL class. If you want to add a separate class that may be something more focused on something other than just your core ESL, which we typically call that conversational English, which is where we help them with their functional English, how to get to the grocery store, how to deal with schools, how to do better at work, academic English, whatever it is that your students specifically need, or whatever the focus of your classes are. If you want a supplemental class, that hour that you have on Wednesday night, that's a good time to have that. But your meaty core ESL class really needs to be 1.5 to 2 hours. So you want to have that on a different day. And you can have morning, night, you can have both. It really just depends. So that brings us to how many volunteers do you need? A lot of people think, oh, well, I can't start ESL. I don't have enough volunteers. I started my first class with one, just me. So you just need one volunteer to start your ministry or your program. That's sometimes that you may feel that limits you as to how much you can do. And you might just be able to have one class at that first go round, but you just need to have one volunteer, and you have to be willing. You have to be patient. If you're not willing to kind of wait for the students to come, then you're not going to ever get your program off the ground. Or you may have too many students and you may need to wait for the other volunteers to come. But you need patience And you need at least one person who can step out in faith and say, I know that my community needs English as a second language, and I'm going to start an ESL ministry and just stay here and work until the volunteers and the students come. Because there are internationals everywhere, and they definitely need us to help them. So, to recap so far, we need training. We know we don't need to speak a foreign language. We need to have a place to have our ESL classes, and we need to decide how long our classes are going to be and what day they're going to be. And we need childcare. So those are some really good basics you need so far. And the last thing we'll talk about today is what materials are you going to use. And you really need to decide to use a textbook. Some people want to just go online and pull a bunch of stuff off the internet because it's cheap and it's free. And you can definitely get away with doing that for a long time. There are lots of materials there. And if that's the way you decide to go, I would just warn you that a lot of them are printed in Britain. So if you're not using UK English, just be sure you verify your translations or your spelling before you go ahead and use those. But if you do that, if you use that approach, it's not providing you kind of a controlled way to measure your students' progress. It's not always going to provide you, this is what my level ones need to know, and this is the grammar that's designed for them. This is my level twos, and this is what's designed for them. Usually it's not cohesive, as in it has something designed for level 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not a program. It's not an educational program. It's just materials off the internet. So you're not going to have good growth among your students. They're going to know English, and they're probably going to learn more than they would if you didn't teach them anything, but they're not going to have measurable goals. And as a teacher, you're going to get more out of having a textbook because it provides teaching tips and it gives you materials and ideas and things that you can do each week so that you're not having to work as hard to create your lesson. Because it's going to have this kind of controlled, and it's going to be routine. So your students will know, okay, this is how we learn our sentences. This is how we learn our vocabulary. This is how we review our sentences. This is how we review our vocabulary. This is how we practice our dialogues. So they're going to know how to do those things so that you're not reteaching them those drills. You're just teaching them new vocabulary, new sentences, and it makes your teaching time go more quickly so that when you get into practicing communication, when they are practicing actually making their own sentences, when they're practicing using that vocabulary on their own, that time is longer because you're not spending so much time trying to explain how to do things because you used a different material last week and now you're using somebody else's curriculum this week, and you're not trying to explain something new every time. So to recap from the beginning, get training. You don't have to speak another language. You want to decide when, where, how long your classes are going to be, and you want to make sure that you have childcare. You want to use a textbook. So, and you just need one volunteer, and if you are just faithful and patient, more volunteers will come. Invite people to visit your classes. Let them see it's not big and scary, that you're having a great time with your students. They're having a great time with you. And with just patience, love, and dedication, your ESL ministry will blossom and flourish, and you will have students and teachers. And the next thing you know, you will just be amazed that you were ever afraid to start this ministry to begin with. If I can ever help or you have questions, feel free to contact me. And it's been great helping you learn a few new things and how to start an ESL ministry.